So you're very welcome to this series of lectures, An Introduction to Research Policy Analysis in Education. I'm doing the set of lectures on the basis that you are interested in becoming an education researcher and in the area of policy, so a research policy analyst. My own name is Geraldine Mooney Simmie. I'm the Professor of STEM Education here in the School of Education in the University of Limerick, and I'm the Director of EpiSTEM, which is the National Centre for STEM Education here in UL. So what I will be doing here in this introduction is just looking at what is actually involved in the area of research in policy education, what's actually needed. So we'll consider, for example, why do you want to become a research policy analyst? What is the interest and passion you have that wants you to actually learn more about policy, where it comes from, how the policy process circulates between the macro, meso and micro levels, how all the policy actors are involved, who has more power than others, etc., etc. So, for example, I myself completed my own PhD in policy studies in Trinity College in 2009, and ever since then I've been lecturing in policy studies here in the University of Limerick. I'm particularly myself interested in critical and feminist policy analysis, and as the lecture series goes by, you'll get more of an idea of what that means and where I'm coming from. But you will have for yourself to figure out what's your interest, where are you coming from. Are you claiming to be neutral and objective and distant from the work and studying with a positivistic hat on you? Or are you anti-positivistic studies in many, many of the other traditions that are there that look at policy in a different way? And for example, I look at policy and education, and I look at education as being an apparatus of the state, and I look at it in terms of the social construction of the world and the kind of person we want to produce through the education system. So there's a very serious interest in who we are as students and as persons in the education system, our human subjectivity. So I'm interested in what Bazul has to say here about considering education as an open ethical question, but that surely invites us to rethink about where education is positioned. It's not an old moral development, it is a moral development that is relevant to the world at the moment. Now, I'm doing this lecture series in 2026. I'm doing it in the country of Ireland and in the continent of Europe. And these are questions you will also have to consider, because the country you are in matters and where you're positioned matters in terms of all of those selections and justifications that you'll be making. And as I said, a desired human subject and human subjectivity is very much at the heart of education. The education system is educo. It's concerned with leading out a certain type of person. Educo, leading out. So what aspect of our humanity is looked for at the moment to be led out? And then how does the education policy researcher study this desired human subjectivity? Who are we today in the contemporary world? What model of humanity is in play? And is there a better model? For example, we tend to go very strongly for the 18th century view of the Enlightenment man, a Cartesian human who separated his body from his mind, who didn't have a holistic connection between his feelings world and his thinking world, and where he operated from a dualistic system of mind-body split. So is that the best description of a human in the contemporary world? So these are big philosophical questions, and they're philosophical questions that draw us in at the moment when we look at policy. How is the human positioned in policy? For example, Lee and Lee talk about the position of the human being seen as we want the smart person, where SMART stand for something that I'll come to later on in this series. And Hannah Arendt from olden times reminded us from 1950s actually that we have a plurality of the human condition. We're not all exactly the same. How do we honour that plurality of the human condition through education? Or are we just doing constant comparison to an ideal human all the time? So these are big questions that need to be considered. So in the sociology of education, then, you're actually looking at the relations between the state, the school, and the society. I think of it myself as one giant monopoly board with even a go-to-jail space. And that giant monopoly board looks at the relations between the state, the school, and the society. And therefore, we have to ask ourselves, while knowledge and values and agency and collective responsibility and all are swirling around there, do we see those relations as being shared responsibility between the state, school, and society, or do we see it as distributed downwards? Is what Jean Tronto called it, is it just a hierarchy of privileged irresponsibility, where somebody else will tell you what to do, but they don't plan to do it themselves? So we have to look at all of this. And I know when I did my PhD with Seamus O'Bucala in Trinity College, Seamus was very interested in history. And I've since become very interested in the philosophical questions that govern education. And of course, policy itself is positioned in social theory and in the sociology of education. And those are all the foundational studies that we actually introduce student teachers to. We might lose it later on with the more experienced teachers. So why do we need to know about history, about the past, to help us understand the present, the sociology, which is the study of the present, and the philosophical questions are about what kind of future do we want? Very interesting times at the moment because the European Commission, UNESCO, the OECD and others are actually looking at that question. We are once again in the world at a time of change. That's putting it mildly. And so all of the organisations and supranational policy organisations around the world are considering what actually is a future going to look like and what kind of education system do we need. And in Ireland ourselves, we are conducting what's called a national conversation in relation to a future's Ireland. So all the actors in the schools, in society, and then we have to ask about society as well as having markets. Does that have a public interest value? Are we more than the sum of the parts? Do we need public infrastructure? Do we need more of that? Have we public interest values? And you might wonder why politics and public interest values matters to education. But education is an open ethical question, but it's connected with living in the world. We're talking about the next generation going out to live in the world and to contribute. So what does an educated person, how do they come out of schooling with their qualities and with their concerns? How do they make a difference in the world and in the political decisions that they will make into the future? So you need through all of these studies to be able to justify your selections, which means you're going to be asked, where are you coming from? Why have you selected this research worldview or what's called a paradigm? Can you position yourself reflexively? Are you critically examining yourself reflexively to know where you're coming from? And reflexivity kind of suggests to me that you look at the dark side of yourself as well as the bright and sunny side. You looked at strengths and weaknesses and you understand your humanity and the round. So is your research design, strategy and methodology all aligning? Is it cohering? What is your research question? How are you going to collect the data? Is it primary sources, secondary sources? Are they straight from government? Or where are they coming from? How are you planning to analyse the data? What methodology are you going to use? How are you going to assure the data trustworthiness of your findings and publish it so that others can actually see where you're coming from? And then how are you assuring ethics into the future? So really, to understand this section, you do need to get your hands on some very good research, particularly research books and research papers that help you and show you how to do this. I've recommended here a chapter in a book by Murphy, it's called Murphy and Costa, and it shows you how you can study the policy by bringing down a lens over it, a theoretical framework over it, and then seeing what's in there, what's missing, or whatever. So that would be one way of doing policy research. And so we are looking at then in terms of the politics and the policy of education, we're looking at what are the ideological governing forms in your country. So considering your country and considering the way countries are actually set up and socially constructed, all of our countries and our institutions are socially constructed according to a framework. Is it an autocracy? Is it run by kind of the one strong man with the military? Is it run as a theocracy? In other words, is it religion is right in there, and is it one dominating religion that's running it, so it's a theocracy? Is it a technocracy? Is it the tech bros, as we call them today? Are they the people that are running it with their algorithms and how socially engineered we can be as humans? Is it an expertocracy? Is it just the experts all the time walking around telling us what we should be doing and what we should not be doing? Or is it a democracy, which is a demos, means the Latin for people? Is it responsive to the needs of the people? And that's not just simply majority rule. A democracy cares for the needs of the minorities and ensures it in law as well as in practice. And it also works along the key principles of justice, care and equality. So that's what actually democracy involves. So therefore it involves alliances, very careful hard work, etc. So I'm recommending there a book that looks at critical policy studies because it actually debunks a lot of this. It makes you ask yourself out loud, what kind of a democracy do you have? So I live now in Ireland and in Europe, and it's 2026, and I like asking the question how thick or how thin our democracy is. And for me, the test of a democracy is it will have a struggle. There will be a struggle over different views. And if it doesn't have a struggle, then one view is dominating. And I'm interested in domination because that would mean for me domestication, neutralization, and even at that point colonization. So the lecture series then, I'm going to briefly look at this mini series of lectures to give you an introduction to policy studies through looking at the framing of the study, the purpose of it, and the processes, the global influences. Then where would you reach if you were looking to study it in Ireland? Who would you reach to? What theorists are there? How would you mind the gap between policy and practice? And why would that gap be important if you lived in a democracy? Why would that gap, that discursive gaps between policy and practice be crucial to living in a democracy? And then finally, if you want to actually take your policy study that you have completed and you want to submit it and publish it in a journal or bring it to an education conference.